They were instructed by the young master. "You'll see what they did in your room," Chu hinted, her aged face still wearing a kind smile. "Oh," Vivian replied, noticing clothes out of the corner of her eye. Vivian stood up, supporting herself on the glass table, and headed inside. She was right. A large assortment of clothes, shoes, and accessories were now filling her closet, all seemingly the latest fashion. Now, he had placed a life of material luxury right before her. Vivian's lips curled into a bitter smile. Suddenly, the doorbell rang again. What was being delivered this time? Vivian walked out of the master bedroom to the entrance. It was Grant. Grant. Vivian and Grant had agreed to avoid addressing each other as siblings in public. Vivian hugged Grant, whispering in his ear, "Grant, why are you here?" This pose made Grant uncomfortable. Why are young people so touchy? Can't they just talk without hugging? All right. Vivian let go, standing obediently like a soldier waiting for orders. "Could you set another place?" Vivian smiled sweetly. This was the first time she'd seen a family member since yesterday. "Sure." Although not fully understanding young people's thoughts, Chu complied. "Grant, haven't you eaten yet? Come join me. You too." Vivian never liked the term servant. Everyone was born and raised by their parents. Why should there be a class distinction? "No, I've eaten. I'll call the driver to pick you up after you finish eating," Chu declined, finding Vivian's kindness endearing. Vivian looked out the window, shaking her head slightly. "Now, I don't need that much." "What do you want, Vivian? A year ago, you said you wanted a lavish life, and now I can give you what the Dawson family couldn't. What are you still unsatisfied with?" Howard gripped her chin firmly, forcing her to look into his eyes. In his angry gaze, she saw full of hatred. "I don't need it, that's it." Howard released Vivian abruptly, and she fell back onto the bed. "Hey, do you think I'm still the same person? Do you think there's still some ridiculous love between us?" The person who had hurt him so badly was her, the woman he loved most. "No, there isn't." Vivian didn't want to explain anything. She didn't know where to start or what to say. Even if there was no love between them, last night, in another sense, she had possessed him, even if not his heart. Howard's icy gaze fell on Vivian, sitting huddled on the bed. He opened the bedside drawer, took out a pill and a bottle of mineral water, and placed them in front of her. "Take this. I won't let a woman I don't love carry my child." His cold eyes and emotionless tone were devoid of any warmth. "Vivian, you're so naive. You've never forgotten him over this year, but he's long forgotten you. Bringing you back into his arms was just to revenge your cold-heartedness. You even naively thought about having his child. Have you been watching too many dramas and reading too many novels? Those unreal scenarios won't happen to you." Vivian stared at the pill in his palm for a long time, forcing a weak smile. "I understand." Vivian opened the water bottle and swallowed the pill. "You!" Owen Dawson was so angry that he had a heart attack. Just returning home, Ida quickly fetched pills and warm water for him to swallow. "What's going on? What happened?" Grant initially didn't understand why Vivian hated her own biological mother, but after learning everything, he too couldn't help but despise her. "It's all his doing. How could I have such a son?" "Little Grant." Ida stood up and looked at Grant. "Listen to me." "Mother?" Grant found the term almost laughable for the first time. "My mother is dead. I don't have a mother." Grant didn't want to waste more words with them. He picked up the car keys from the entrance and left the villa, driving away in his sports car. Continuously claiming to like Vivian, yet weren't they the ones who traded her for $3 billion? The divorce agreement wasn't even signed by him. Because he would never trade his sister for profit. In the ruthless business world, although Grant wasn't as capable as Howard, he still held his own ground. He knew Howard was astute in business, a man who could identify a losing deal with just one look. Such a formidable person, wouldn't he have designs on his sister? The more Grant thought about it, the more worried he became. He couldn't rest easy with Vivian in that dangerous den. Yesterday, he had someone investigate Howard's residence and learned that he owned many properties, but the one he frequented was a high-end apartment close to the Duffy family. Howard owned the top 2 floors of that high-rise building. "I'm so hungry." Vivian didn't know how long she had been crying, alternating between sleeping and waking up to sorrow. This was completely unlike her usual self. "Vivian, pull yourself together, don't starve yourself." She could already guess what the outside world was saying about her, but she didn't care. Compared to Howard's coldness, those slanders meant nothing. Vivian, wearing the thigh-length shirt, stepped out of the master bedroom. The meal had already been set out. Looking around, Vivian finally found a busy figure in the kitchen and made her way there, despite the discomfort between her legs. "Who's there?" Vivian peeked into the kitchen, finding a middle-aged woman busy with the cooking. "You're awake, miss." The woman smiled warmly at Vivian. "Who are you?" Vivian blinked her spirited eyes, puzzled. "I'm in charge of your diet. The young master called the villa, and I rushed over to prepare lunch for you." "I hope it suits your taste," the woman smiled again at Vivian. Vivian paused. "How should I address you?" "Just call me Chu," she said, serving the rich bone broth she had prepared, presenting 4 dishes and a soup before Vivian. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, Miss Vivian." The woman continued to smile, noting it was her first time seeing the young master care so much for a girl. Vivian must be special to him. "Thank you." Vivian heard the doorbell, peeked through the peephole, and then opened the door. Several men moved things in and out, and a woman bustled in the room. After finishing their tasks, they bowed to Vivian and swiftly left the apartment. Who were they? Vivian wondered at the speed of their actions. Without a word, Howard took a shirt from the wardrobe and threw it on the bed. Vivian quickly put on the shirt, grateful for something to cover her body. "Clothes will be brought in soon." Howard pulled her into his embrace. "Vivi, I can now buy you a palace, even build you a castle." A year ago, when Duffy was in crisis, they had broken up. Back then, he was exhausted from the pressures of the family business. He had angrily and anxiously questioned her. "Why marry Grant?" "Why?" "Because he's rich, the Dawson family is rich. They can provide me a lavish life." "And the Duffy family, it's about to collapse, isn't it?" "No matter what you do, the Duffy family will never stand up to the Dawson family." She had pretended to be calm and emotionless, but her heart ached as if it was being stabbed. Now the tables had turned. In a year, he proved that the Duffy family was no longer the same. He could now command respect, and the Duffy family was a business giant. Many enterprises were eager to do business with Duffy, whose annual turnover was 60 times that of the Dawson family. Vivian looked out the window, shaking her head slightly. "Now, I don't need that much." "What do you want, Vivian?" "A year ago, you said you wanted a lavish life, and now I can give you what the Dawson family couldn't." "What are you still unsatisfied with?" Howard gripped her chin firmly, forcing her to look into his eyes. In his angry gaze, she saw full of hatred. "I don't need it, that's it." Howard released Vivian abruptly, and she fell back onto the bed. "Hey, do you think I'm still the same person? Do you think there's still some ridiculous love between us?" The person who had hurt him so badly was her, the woman he loved most. "No, there isn't." Vivian didn't want to explain anything. She didn't know where to start or what to say. Even if there was no love between them, last night, in another sense, she had possessed him, even if not his heart. Howard's icy gaze fell on Vivian, sitting huddled on the bed. He opened the bedside drawer, took out a pill and a bottle of mineral water, and placed them in front of her. "Take this. I won't let a woman I don't love carry my child." His cold eyes and emotionless tone were devoid of any warmth. "Vivian, you're so naive. You've never forgotten him over this year, but he's long forgotten you. Bringing you back into his arms was just to revenge your cold-heartedness. You even naively thought about having his child. Have you been watching too many dramas and reading too many novels?" Those unreal scenarios won't happen to you. Vivian stared at the pill in his palm for a long time, forcing a weak smile. I understand. Vivian opened the water bottle and swallowed the pill. Vivian's tears swirled in her eyes. She nodded forcefully, sniffing as her tears fell onto the floor. Grant hugged her, comforting her in her moment of distress. The water's cold. Howard touched the water in the bathtub, finding it frigid. Vivian's eyes glistened with tears, and Howard gently wiped them away with his fingertip. Was she crying because of her divorce from Grant? Vivian opened her watery eyes, and the sight of Howard's captivating face surprised her. Howard. Vivian immediately curled up, hugging her knees. Why have you come back? If I hadn't, you might have frozen to death here. Howard lifted Vivian out of the cold water. How had Grant cared for her? Why was she lighter than before, easier to lift? Howard, let me get dressed first. Vivian said, too embarrassed to look at him. Where are there clothes for you to wear here? Eh? Vivian's lips curled into a smile. Does this mean no other woman has been here? Was she the first? Then I'll wear yours. Vivian gazed at him with a mischievous smile. In Howard's arms, she felt happy. By his side, she could be her true self. Howard silently took a shirt from the closet and threw it on the bed. Vivian quickly put on the shirt, grateful for something to cover her body. Clothes will be delivered shortly. Howard pulled her into his embrace. Vivi, now I can buy you a palace, even build you a castle. A year ago, when Duffy was in crisis, they had parted ways. Back then, he was exhausted from the pressures of the family business. He had angrily questioned her. Why marry Grant? Why? Because he's rich, the Dawson family is rich, they can provide me a lavish life. And the Duffy family, it's about to collapse, isn't it? No matter what you do, the Duffy family will never stand up to the Dawson family. She had pretended to be calm and emotionless, but her heart ached as if it was being stabbed. Now the tables had turned. In a year, he had proved that the Duffy family was no longer the same. He could now command respect, and the Duffy family was a business giant. Many enterprises were eager to do business with Duffy, whose annual turnover was 60 times that of the Dawson family. What's wrong with that? Didn't you still sneak out to meet Owen when my dad was alive? Vivian wouldn't accept things given out of pity. Their family was now just an empty shell. She had sworn in front of her father's tombstone to make those who took everything from their family pay it all back. Vivi. Ida was again speechless in shock, realizing Vivian knew everything. Anyway, I won't allow Grant to marry you. Owen Dawson, as Grant's biological father, couldn't stand by and watch his own son marry his half-sister. Siblings marrying, mother leaving our family for Dawson family. These are explosive news for the gossip magazines, aren't they? The recent uproar around Dawson Company is of great interest to them. These stories would make headlines, right? Vivian told herself she must not soften, even if Ida was her biological mother. No one can stop me, I've made it very clear. I will marry Grant, he has already proposed to me. Vivian's smile deepened, her eyes cold, her fists clenched tightly. She must not soften. After dropping this statement, Vivian headed towards the second floor. Is this karma? Ida cried, covering her face, while Owen Dawson sat beside her, speechless. Open black lens bracket knock, knock, knock close black lens bracket. Vivian stood at the study door and knocked. Come in. A pleasant voice came from inside. Brother. Vivian entered the study, looking at Grant. Bro, guess their reaction? Shocked into silence by the explosive news, I bet. Grant stood up from his leather chair and affectionately stroked Vivian's head. Yes. Vivian nodded. Brother. Don't soften your heart. Have you forgotten how your father died? Grant knew Vivian's kindness, but the two people downstairs deserved to taste the consequences of their actions. But they are your biological parents. Hey, a person who abandoned me 3 days after I was born doesn't deserve to be my mother. Grant. Vivian tugged at Grant's sleeve. Don't be upset. Mia would be heartbroken to see you like this." Mia, Owen Dawson's deceased wife, had always treated Grant as her own son, showering him with love and affection. "When Mom was dying, I begged my father to let me see her one last time, but he coldly refused." Grant had knelt for 3 hours, pleading with Owen Dawson to visit Mia, but was repeatedly rejected. By the time Owen Dawson arrived at the hospital, Mia had already passed away. Grant harbored unspeakable complex hatred towards the two downstairs. "Bro, stop talking about it." Vivian wrapped her arms around Grant's waist. "You still have me, don't be sad anymore." Grant stroked Vivian's hair. "Now, I only have you." Vivian smiled playfully. At 19, she was still a child, yet she had to bear so much. "Vivi, what about Howard?" Grant knew Vivian had always liked Howard. But to avenge her mother and gather more evidence of their involvement in Cody's murder, marrying Grant was inevitable. Only by marrying Grant could she gain access to Dawson Company and investigate deeper. Vivian's heart tightened painfully. Grant looked at Vivian with pity. Howard had been saving the Duffy family from bankruptcy, caused by his father's investment failures. Howard became CEO and strived to salvage Duffy. Now was the most difficult time for the Duffy family. Leaving him at Duffy family's most difficult time. "Vivi, are you willing to give up your happiness?" Vivian nodded, her eyes filled with pain. "Brother, if I don't avenge our father, I can't live happily. Once you take this step, Vivi, there's no turning back." Grant knew how difficult this step was for Vivian. Vivian nodded again. "I know, brother, don't worry too much about me. I will help you find evidence of their involvement in your father's persecution." Tears began to well up in Vivian's eyes. She nodded heavily, sniffled, and tears dropped onto the floor. Grant embraced her, comforting her as she felt overwhelmed with grief. "Damn, the water's cold." Howard touched the water in the bathtub, finding it icy cold. Vivian's eyes brimmed with tears, and Howard gently wiped them away with his fingertip. Was she crying because of her divorce with Grant? Vivian opened her tear-filled eyes, and the sight of Howard's heart-stirring handsome face startled her. "Howard!" Vivian recoiled in surprise, hugging her knees. Why are you back? If I hadn't come back, you might have frozen to death here." Howard lifted Vivian out of the cold water. How had Grant taken care of her? Why did she feel lighter than before, easier to hold? "Howard, let me get dressed first," Vivian said, embarrassed to look at him. "Where are there clothes for you to wear here?" "Eh?" Vivian's lips curled up. "Does this mean no other woman has been here? Was she the first? Then I'll wear yours." Vivian looked at him with a mischievous smile. In Howard's arms, she felt happy. By his side, she could be her true self. When Vivian returned to H-City from England, she was shocked to learn about this. She never believed her father died under such mysterious circumstances. She hired a private detective to investigate. Upon learning the truth, Vivian approached Grant, who was grieving Mia's death. They shared a common plight and naturally stood on the same side. So Vivian and Grant had a partnership. The male secretary emphasized the last point. This was the most comprehensive information available to date, but it did not reveal the true nature of Vivian and Grant's relationship. They were siblings connected by blood. How much had she hidden? How many secrets did she keep? When Vivian woke up, it was already afternoon. Vivian felt as if her bones were about to fall apart. What happened to her yesterday? Did she get into a fight with someone? Her head was dizzy, her body weak. She tapped her head lightly, as if remembering something. The sleepiness instantly vanished. It really happened. The bloodstains on the sheets and the mess around were proof enough. The sticky fluid between her legs made Vivian extremely uncomfortable. Vivian tried to stand up but fell back onto the bed due to the soreness between her legs. That guy must have gone to work. What was he made of? Why was he so energetic, unlike her current sore and uncomfortable state? Vivian realized she was no longer a virgin, but she didn't feel the slightest bit heartbroken or sad. Sigh, she looked at the strawberry marks covering her body, playfully sticking out her tongue. Vivian, Vivian, you're done for. You never truly forgot him. Vivian shook her head, trying not to reminisce about last night's events. She decided to take a bath first, trying not to think too much. Fate had decided she would have to deal with that demon Howard again. Leaning on the wall and cabinets for support, Vivian barely managed to stand up. She slowly made her way to the bathroom. The bathroom was so large, with nothing to hold onto around the bathtub. With difficulty walking, Vivian had a long way to the tub and had to grit her teeth to continue. After what felt like forever, Vivian finally lay in the bathtub, comfortably soaking in the water. Exhausted, her eyes closed involuntarily. She remembered the night a year ago. Her father, who had always wanted to give her the best, the father who loved her, Vivian wouldn't forget. He was persecuted, died in a car accident on a rainy night, and the culprit was never caught. After returning from England, Vivian hired several private detectives and found witnesses. She finally learned that Cody's accident was orchestrated by her biological mother and the man before her. She wanted to report it to the police, but with no substantial evidence and Owen Dawson's immense power, she couldn't fight him, nor could she let Cody rest in peace. Viv, Owen Dawson felt guilty. You don't owe me anything. The financial deficit in Cody's company was his doing, as was Cody's death, in collaboration with Ida, Vivian's biological mother. Vivi, Ida spoke, her gaze pained as she looked at her daughter. She couldn't marry Grant. How can that be? Owen helped me a great deal, not only filling the billion-dollar deficit in our family accounts but also acquiring our family business, making it a subsidiary of Dawson Company. I really don't know how to thank him. Vivian's cold tone sent chills down the spine. She was seeking revenge. She was avenging Cody. Vivi, you really don't have to do this, Owen Dawson said, guiltily lowering his gaze. Vivian smirked. Owen, I'm marrying Grant to repay you. No, you can't do this, Vivi. Ida protested, panic written all over her still charming face. Oh. Why not? Vivian already knew why she couldn't marry Grant. Because he's… Ida bit her lip, pained. Vivian looked at her mother's pained expression, her heart trembling slightly. She bit her lip and turned away. She had to be ruthless, or her father's death would be in vain. He's Grant, my half-brother, Vivian stated matter-of-factly. Vivi, you knew? Ida looked surprised at her daughter. How did she find out? Did she know they conspired to kill Cody, taking away everything from their family? There are no secrets that time won't reveal. Oh, and you might not know, Grant proposed to me. Vivian had already planned everything with Grant. Vivi, I'll make our family independent from the Dawson family. Just don't marry Grant, we can negotiate anything. Owen Dawson panicked at the thought of his half-sister marrying Grant. What's wrong with Grant? Handsome and sought after by many ladies, I have no reason to refuse. I've already accepted Grant's proposal. Vivian wanted to uncover more about the past events. Marrying Grant was just part of their strategy. You can't, you're siblings. Ida expressed her pain. She hadn't expected Vivian to take such a step. She felt a tingling sensation throughout her body, a wave of heat rushing over her. Howard's erection was ready to burst. He lifted her up, her soft breasts against his sturdy chest, grabbing a soft pillow to place under her slender waist. Then, with a forceful move, he put her beneath him. Her flushed cheeks, her beautiful face, her reactions had once been displayed under another man. This thought made Howard unable to calm down. Her beauty had been possessed by someone else. Damn it! He swiftly spread her legs apart and aimed himself at her. With a forceful thrust of his hips, he penetrated her. Pain. The tearing pain made Vivian's eyebrows furrow. She bit her lower lip as waves of pain hit her, over and over again. Pain? Would a non-virgin still feel pain? Howard didn't care, continuing to thrust inside her shallowly, feeling an unprecedented tightness and satisfaction. Sweat dripped down his handsome face, until he encountered that barrier. "Ha, are you still a virgin?" Howard looked at her pained face, his heart trembling, but any pity was quickly replaced by coldness. How could she still be a virgin? She had been married for a year. With a thrust, he ignored her pain and entered her deeply. Damn it! That thin barrier. It was too late, he had entered her, possessed her. "It hurts, stop, stop. Howard, you bastard, bastard." Vivian cried out in pain, pounding her fists against his chest, tears welling in her eyes. The pain was so intense she had bitten her lip until it bled. In that moment, Howard felt a mix of satisfaction and pity. He leaned down, kissing her lips gently. Married for a year and still untouched? What had happened? How could one neglect such a stunning wife? Could it be that he was impotent? His tongue continued to entwine with hers, his reason long gone. Vivian reached out to embrace his waist, finding a point of support. As the pain gradually faded, Howard's movements were no longer tentative, each thrust forceful and powerful. Ah! Vivian still felt pain, but it wasn't the tearing agony of before. Her voice grew more and more muffled under the extreme contractions, Howard's pace increasing. Passion and ambiguity ignited instantly in the room. The night was still long. The next morning, Howard opened his eyes, his biological clock always starting at this time. 8 in the morning, Howard had never slept so peacefully. The person in his arms was still sleeping soundly, her fair and smooth cheeks, her graceful and tight figure. No matter how much time passed, nothing could quell the hatred and pain in his heart from the beginning. After a night of indulgence, they had to face reality. But she was his woman, and that wouldn't change. Howard breathed hotly into her ear, domineering yet indulgent. "Vivian, you can only be my woman in this lifetime." Howard himself didn't know what got into him early in the morning. Perhaps it was an apology for last night. The bloodstains on the sheets and between her legs were proof enough. She was still untouched, he was her first man. Thinking of this, Howard's eyes softened with indulgence. He never cared for tradition, but subconsciously, he had hoped to be her first. And indeed, he was. He was her first man, and last night, he had taken her again and again, as if he couldn't get enough. Howard was already dressed and ready within half an hour. As a member of the Duffy family, he never procrastinated. Decisive and accurate judgment was how business people described him. Since Howard became the CEO of Duffy, the family had become a legend in the business world. The already wealthy Duffy family was now a leader in the business field. Howard turned to look at the messy bed, his gaze landing on Vivian, her smooth back exposed as she slept. His eyes held complex emotions. Bringing her back to his side was for revenge, right? To make her feel the indescribable pain he felt back then? He withdrew his gaze and quickly left the spacious duplex apartment. Duffy family's top-floor CEO office. "Mr. Howard, I found everything you asked for." The chief secretary entered Howard's office upon receiving permission. "Go on," Howard said, his gaze still on the documents in front of him. 19 years ago, Ida and Owen Dawson collaborated. Owen married the socialite heiress Mia, aiming to take over Mia's family fortune. Ida married Cody, Vivian's successful father. Ida and Owen conspired together, abandoning the seriously ill Cody in a small apartment, leading to his untimely death. They had already deceitfully taken all of Cody's fortune. Howard had investigated everything about Vivian. He wanted to know if she left him a year ago for a lavish lifestyle. "Continue," Howard instructed coldly after signing his name on a contract. "Howard, what on earth are you doing?" Vivian stepped back, her handsome face always carrying a sinister look, as Howard approached her step by step, cornering her against the wall. "Tonight is our wedding night. What do you think I'm going to do?" Howard had no intention of letting her go. Her beauty, everything about her, was to be possessed only by him. "Other men, don't even think about it." "Howard." It's over between us. Besides, Vivian stopped short, biting her lower lip, still as beautiful as ever. Vivian couldn't outright say that today was her first wedding anniversary because, over this year, her marriage to Grant had been nothing but a sham. To be precise, he was her Grant. Just an hour ago, Howard had barged into her first wedding anniversary celebration, and before she could react, she was already in his apartment. "So, you're telling me you're already married?" Howard held Vivian's chin, scoffing coldly. Vivian averted her eyes, unable to face Howard directly. Howard sneered, throwing a divorce agreement in front of Vivian. "You're no longer Grant's woman. Don't even dream of going back to him." Howard lifted her chin, his deep eyes fixating on her, his sinister smile sending shivers down her spine. "You forced him to sign?" Vivian was neither shocked nor crying, because there was no possibility of love between her and Grant. "With a $300 million contract to save Dawson Company, do you think your Grant would care about you?" Howard didn't understand what magic this woman had that made him desperately use $300 million to bind her to him again. "What about you, Howard?" Vivian's eyes stared into his, bringing me back to your side again. "Do you still care about me?" Howard pulled Vivian over, throwing her onto the soft bed. With a ripping sound, her exquisite black backless trailing dress was torn to shreds, her fair skin exposed to the slightly cold air. Vivian gasped for air, trying to move to the other end of the bed, away from him. But Howard wouldn't let her, pulling Vivian into his arms, pinning her beneath him. "Do you think you're worthy of my care?" Howard's tone was calm, as if narrating something mundane, but his heart fluctuated wildly. No matter how much time passed, seeing her again still stirred his heart. What magic did this woman possess? Let me go." Vivian was scared, trembling. Howard had no intention of letting Vivian go, pinning her arms above her head, stripping off her remaining dress. His kiss, devoid of any mercy, covered her lips, forcibly prying open her tender lips, entwining her tongue in a teasing kiss that left Vivian defenseless. No way, she didn't want to lose herself in such confusion, didn't want to be possessed by him without his love. No. With her wit still about her, she knew it couldn't go on like this. Howard smirked, a set of light purple lingerie catching his eye. Her fair skin was so beautiful it captivated him, his lips moving from hers, trailing downwards. His tongue circled her soft skin, flipping her over to be on top. Vivian struggled continuously, but Howard remained indifferent, because he wanted her, desperately wanted her, even if she was no longer pure, he was crazed for her. Howard skillfully unbuttoned her lingerie, capturing her softness in front, smirking wickedly at her, Vivian's cheeks burning red. She couldn't resist his magical, intoxicating breath, like fine wine, enough to completely intoxicate. His sinful fingers began to linger at her sensitive spots. Waves of warmth rushed over her, Vivian realizing she could no longer resist. Her body trembled uncontrollably. "Let go, Howard, you bastard." Howard fiercely kissed her, prying open her tightly closed lips. His lower abdomen was already burning with desire, unable to endure any longer. His fingers lingered at her sensitive spots. "Bastard? Ha, Vivi, you're already wet." The evidence of arousal was right in front of her, and Vivian couldn't deny that she didn't love him. Over this year, she had never forgotten him, but for the sake of avenging her father, she had forced herself to forget him. "Don't say it." Vivian didn't want to hear such shameful words. She was never a part of the weaker group. She would resist, she would provoke. Somehow, her underwear was already gone. Howard looked at the stunning Vivian, her blushing cheeks, her exquisite figure. She didn't know why she reacted so shamefully, nor did she want to admit defeat in front of him. Her slender fingers inadvertently brushed over his already rock-hard erection. Damn it, the raging erection kept causing trouble. Unable to control himself, he quickly took off his suit pants, his erection pressing against her sensitive spot. Vivian gasped for air, knowing she couldn't escape today. Her reason started to fade away, his excellent skills leaving her unable to resist.